Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And we are glad that you found us today. I'm glad to see those numbers climbing a little bit. Got worried there for a second, but Pritchett wasn't worried. Were you, Pritchett?
Pritchett doesn't care.
Pritchett doesn't care. Pritchett doesn't worry.
If there we were doing this when there was like 60 views on our YouTube channel, and I was enjoying it just as much then as I am now. So
yeah,
whoever wants to listen to us prattle on about whatever, I'm thankful for.
So today is the day. Today is the day that we are going to reveal the winner, or select randomly, if randomness exists in the universe, the winner of the book giveaway and the runner-up. So we're excited about that. And before I talk a little bit more about that, I just want to say thank you to Benjamin Handelman, who says, Theology Geek Fitness is amazing. Pritchett has some great exercise sets for us. That said, I'm convinced wall sits are the result of the fall, and Jonathan needs to repent for including them.
You can relate to that, can't you?
Just so everyone knows, obviously, Jonathan has a Facebook group and a YouTube channel, although he's not doing much with the YouTube channel. He has a Facebook group, Theology Geek Fitness, and there are 9 or 10 people who are actively going through video exercises that Pritchett has produced. It's too bad the cameraman didn't make it into any of those shots, because I've heard that he's bald-headed and gorgeous. And but that cameraman, myself, is also engaging in the Theology Geek Fitness program. And this week, I'm feeling a little better today because yesterday was day off. But man, it killed me, and those wall sits were terrible. And I don't even have the benefit of like you guys out there who are doing it, who don't have to do it if you don't want to. Like Pritchett comes into my office and tells me when to do it. He also makes my lunch for me and brings me a snack at 2:00 in the afternoon. Although I ate it early today just before the show. So, but thank you so much for that, Benjamin Handelman. Now, let's get to this. We are going to read some comments and if there are super chats, other super chats and things like that. But first, I just want to say, whatever happens here today, Jonathan, could you reach and grab that hat there for me that I wore all over Turkey like a modified Indiana Jones?
This one?
Yes, this one. As you can see, it is filled with pieces of paper that are folded so that Jonathan, who is going to select in a moment the winner randomly, cannot see the names and pick his favorite patrons over others. But you dropped one out. That could have been any one of these fine folks, and now they're missing it. But so I want to say before we do that I really do
got these all. Okay.
Appreciate every one of you who gave anything. If you gave $1, if you plan in the future to give, we appreciate you because you make this show possible. As you know, there are other things that we have to do throughout the week here at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. Just yesterday, I was working on projects for students and things like that. But this is something that we believe is a ministry outlet for us, and we believe if we have any gifts, we believe that this is one of the most obvious avenues where we're able to exercise those, and we're not able to exercise them always in our academic life here at the seminary. So thank you for that outlet. It means so much to us. And
Hervey, I do not cut the crust off the sandwich, though. So not quite Miss Maryland,
But I want to say that we do appreciate you, whoever you are that has helped us, and we appreciate just the viewers. Thank you. And we are going to get to Q&A here in a little bit, but we love you all, and we have plans for this channel. We want this to be something we do for the rest of our lives. We want to put together conferences. We want to be able to travel places that can't afford to have us come and not have to worry about paying our expenses to go to those places to proclaim and defend the truth about the Lord Jesus. So with all of that said, let's just get right to it here somewhat close to the beginning. By the way, before we do, I will say thank you so much, Angel WVM, for that $10 super chat. It means so much. He says, just cuz, man, just cuz. We appreciate that. All right, let's jump into this. So here it comes. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is a stack of books sitting in front of Pritchett right now. I don't know if you can see all of them. Get your water bottle out of the way. And there are 15 books there. Well, actually, there's 16 because I included Blinding Lights at Pritchett's behest, and which is my most controversial and first ever written book.
Controversial?
That I don't even sell anymore. You can probably find it somewhere, but I don't.
It's an awesome book.
I've ended publication of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, the person who
not have.
is selected, these are people, if you don't know what we're doing, these are people who either became patrons since, I think it was like December 19th or something, right up to the new year, the midnight of the new year. And
I love it that it's on me.
Yeah. Well, I wanted them to see the books, but or people who are already patrons who increased their pledge. We appreciate you, and so we've included those. As you know, if you already give $50, or if you started giving $50, you will receive, it's over there, you will receive a framed page from the 1838 printing of Natural Theology by William Paley. Obviously, an exciting thing for people from who are interested in apologetics.
With fingerprint smudges
with Braxton Hunter's fingerprints all over them, as if that matters. But if I commit a crime, you might be of help to the police.
That's right.
So with that, let's find out. And then we're going to do a second runner-up. And the second runner-up is, well, I'll just let you be Vanna White, okay? The second runner-up is going to get two of my books. Sorry, not as exciting, but my Letters from Ignorantia and my Evangelistic Apologetics.
Yeah.
So those are two of my favorite ones. And so we're going to do this.
This is probably the best thing you've ever written, and it's mercifully short, too.
So we're gonna do this now. And there are 42 names in here. And so you have 2 chances out of 42 if you're in this. All right, so let's go for it.
All right.
I was going to hold it and you could pull out.
Okay.
So we want to be both part of this. All right, here we go. Only pull out one. That's how this works, Pritchett. Out of the hat of mystery.
Look at that. What is all this?
Is that 2? Did you pull out 2?
No, I pulled out 1, but it's one long.
Oh, yeah. So what's the name?
The winner.
This is for the 16 books.
Yep. John Sexton.
John Sexton. John, I don't know if you can see it. You can't, but I can help. John. There it is. John Sexton. John Sexton, everyone. Yay, John Sexton.
For John Sexton.
All right, so John Sexton.
He slipped me $200. Everything on there is written John Sexton.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And we're going to prove that right now by going for number 2, which is going to be the and John Sexton. If I think I have your at least your email address, I will reach out to you to make sure we get your shipping address, and we'll get all that squared away. But now for the number 2 prize, the runner-up. Do you say second runner-up or the runner-up?
Runner-up.
I think it's the runner-up. The second runner-up would be 3rd place, right? We aren't giving anything away for 3rd place. All right, what do you have?
Johnson. No, just kidding. Justin Hinthorn.
Let me see. Justin Justin Henthorn. Justin. Come on now. Cameron to make fun of me for this. Justin Henthorn. Yeah, you see it. There it is. Justin Henthorn, you are the proud owner. Well, I don't know if you're proud, but you're going to be the owner of Letters from Ignorantia and Evangelistic Apologetics.
But look, there's news that Braxton doesn't even know.
What's that?
And I decided this today when you did something I told you not to do.
Okay.
So now I'm going to do something because it only costs, I don't know, $3 for me to do it for all of our patrons. All of our patrons who want it, and I'm not saying just you may not want. I don't know if you want it because I don't have everyone's names and addresses where to ship this stuff. But for every patron who wants it, I will send them a copy of Ancient Orient and Old Testament by K.A. Kitchen, since we have an endless amount of them.
Wow. So in that sense,
I'm going to pay
for
for that with some money that you were not supposed to give me. So,
well, praise the Lord. So now that means
everyone
who wants it is a winner, but you'll have to...
every patron who wants it...
You'll have to notify Pritchett somewhere.
Yeah. If you're we have an email address.
Yeah. Well, you could... Okay, send it to braxton@trinityradio.org.
Yeah, and if you're a patron and you send us your address, you'll get it, which means you have to be actually watching the program to know about that. But any patron who wants it will get a copy of K.A. Kitchen's classic Ancient Orient and Old Testament, because everyone's a winner at Trinity Radio.
That's supposed to say Braxton@TrinityRadio.org.
And come on, this is like the coolest participation trophy ever. I mean, you are getting a book, right? It's not, but you need to read it. It's a good book. It's older, but it's a good book.
That is a great book, and Kitchen's no joke. So what we're going to do is we'll send all that stuff out to you. Now, if you're one of those people who is going to be receiving the page from the from William Paley's Natural Theology, I think I told someone that I was going to start sending those out this week. I'm going to start sending those out on Monday or Tuesday. And so give it a little time, but it's coming. And that will come to you. And I'm very excited about that. There are, I think, 6 or 7 people who are receiving those. Yeah. And for those of you that increased your pledge, some of you anybody that increased or even is giving at all, we appreciate it. But some of you increased dramatically. And I really appreciate that. Now, let me say this. I know that there will be some of you who, and you're well within your rights to do this, who will drop off as patrons after the giveaway is over.
But we still appreciate
every
what you've
little
done. Bit that we've done, yeah.
And it has helped the show in that way. But we certainly would love it if you would remain in our patron community and continue on with us. We're going to do other things in the future that we hope will be beneficial.
We've got more books to give away. So,
all right, Jeremy Scott Despain says, awesome work, Trinity Radio. Praying for the Lord to enlarge your reach and ministry. Keep the faith.
Thank you.
Now, someone might wonder, Pritchett, and we haven't really said anything about this in a long time, what the point is. Like, how is our program or what we're doing here any different than what they're doing at, say, Capturing Christianity or Reasonable Faith or something like that? Well, here's the thing. First of all, none of them have Jonathan Pritchett. Secondly, it's important, I think, to say that what we bring to the table, if there's anything that I do well, and I'm not, if this is your first time watching, I hope you don't get the vibe from me that I'm this arrogant jerk. But I don't like to point out my strengths, but I think one of the strengths I have is explaining difficult stuff in an understandable way, and combining that with what we do here is we think that there needs to be a response to atheist internet content. YouTube is still just dominated with atheist content creators, and we want a Christian apologetics response to every one of those videos. That's a huge task, and so that means we probably won't quit anytime soon, and I hope we never quit. But on top of that, we also don't just want to be defensive, we want to be offensive, and so in that regard, the Bible studies. Just this morning, I launched chapter 34 of the book of Genesis. It's a doozy. It's interesting. It's maybe a little funny. And we want people to be able to come here for their own biblical edification as well. And of course, just to have a good time on the Friday live stream and get questions answered. So that's kind of the goal of this thing. We also travel and speak on the road, and that's been tough during COVID. But I've spoken in hundreds of churches. Pritchett's gone with me for some of those. And until this year, I was on the road like at least a couple times a week. And so We want to be able to do that again in the future once things calm down. So,
and our patrons
anyway.
help us with the expenses, because not, we go to churches we just ask for our expenses covered and a love offering of whatever they can give. And some churches give more than others. Some churches can just cover expenses. So the Patreon account money helps us, be able to eat while we're on the road and all that stuff. So
thank you, Elizabeth.
We do appreciate that. I'd say one other thing that I think that we emphasize here that I don't think a lot of YouTube channels emphasize enough is the importance of evangelism and why apologetics matters at all for reaching lost people. It's one thing to say apologetics is good, and we say this. It's good for strengthening the faith of those who already believe. But it's increasingly important in our culture when you're evangelizing lost people, not just from a YouTube studio, but when you're on the street, when you're going to various events and engaging people and answering questions. Because we have one of the nights when we have somebody invite us for the weekend. One of them is bring a skeptic friend night. We always do an open Q&A.
What we do here, we do there.
And we tell the church. I mean, we've done this before. You're going to get some people in there. They may say things that are going to make church folks uncomfortable. Usually they'll have manners, but some of them will use foul language or whatever and desecrate the sanctuary or whatever. But that's part of it. But we want to be able to give an answer to every question that they have, in the hopes that they will repent and believe the gospel. And that's one thing that I think, if I had to be critical of all of our friends and colleagues around YouTube, is they need to be more evangelistic.
Yeah, so we're going to get to, we have a couple of serious questions here, but before we get to those, just saying, like, here's Eddie Vasquez. He says he listened to the Genesis thing today, and there's some points he disagree with. I love that. That's part of what we like about this, is Christians coming together and atheists coming in and talking about this sort of stuff. And and that's great. Also, a Punch Bowl Haircut, a rare sincere post from him. He says, CC gets a little heady sometimes. You definitely provide something he doesn't. You both are extremely intelligent and well-read, but break it down to accessible for people in all walks of life. Well, I really appreciate that.
Hey, Eddie, this will come to surprise nobody, but Braxton and I, we disagree on stuff all the time. I don't understand all of the acrimony that happens between Christians on the internet over things, because you and I don't agree on every theological issue, and we hang out and get along and have fun. And I don't get it.
Pritchett doesn't even know the nice things I said about him in today's video that I released this morning. A transgender, transracial, lesbian Christian says, this is one of the best Christian apologetics channels on YouTube. Keep up the good work.
Nice.
Well,
thank
you for that super chat. I greatly appreciate that.
I don't even.
Also, Pritchett's feistiness, Elizabeth says, keeps her around.
All in good fun.
I really love the way atheists feel like they create so impervious argument, and Braxton Jonathan comes along and dismantles it. Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, Jeff Hill says, can we just message you through Patreon for the book? Yes, you can. And in fact, I saw that you just did, Jeff. So.
Yeah, that's technology stuff. If it works, great.
Punch Bowl Haircut says, again, you also have two hosts with contrasting personalities that kind of provide things that others can't. Gimli and Legolas.
Darn right.
For example. Jose Martinez, thank you for that super chat. He says, I'm glad you don't respond to most atheist videos because it would be a waste of time. Also, when Christian biographies, which Christian biographies would you recommend? Well, I mean, the one that everybody recommends is the what's the guy's name? Bonhoeffer, right? Is that Dietrich a biography?
Bonhoeffer. Yeah, he's good. And then, of course, this is a weak area in my reading.
Me too.
I am happy to just read the biographical data sheet about somebody when I read
the biographical
data sheet. Sorry, I'm from Arkansas, man. Shut up. I have a Leighton Flowers moment when every now and then.
Man.
So when I read something from a figure of history, I'll read the biographical data sheet,
Yeah.
the top sheet, the Wikipedia
Or data, whatever.
Yeah, the Wikipedia page that they are 3 pages they put before you read the work, and I'm fine with that because I don't really read much about the figures themselves, and I need to do more of that. So I wish I could recommend that, but that's a weak
I still
area of
think,
my
even though he
reading.
wasn't a Christian, if you haven't read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, you're missing out.
Yeah, that's a fantastic
Samuel
read.
Welker says Pritchett is the next Oprah with his giveaway. All right.
You get a book,
Let's get
and
to
you
us.
get a book.
You get kitchens, and you get kitchens. All right. Now let's get to some serious questions here, and we'll go back and forth. So Trevor Adams says, "Does God have an actual infinite amount of thoughts?" Now I have an interesting history with this question, namely that I was sitting in an airport somewhere, and I was thinking about the future and how even though the future will never be an actual infinite, we will always be approaching but never arriving at infinity as we go further and further into the future. For those of us who will live forever in heaven, I thought, well, God would know, right? God would know the whole timeline going forward. He would know the infinite future, even the stuff that hasn't happened, at least on an exhaustive understanding of omniscience. But I thought then his thoughts would have to cross an actual infinite, which is kind of at what you're getting at here. And I thought, now that doesn't seem right, because how could he think through an actual infinite series like that? So this was a problem for me for a minute, and I thought maybe it was a philosophical argument that proved open theism of some sort was true. Open theism being the view that God does not have exhaustive knowledge of all future events. And so I thought about it, and I started reading some journal articles, and this has actually come up. And one of the things that's resolved this pretty well for me is I'm not like we talk. You've heard people talk about classical theism. I'm like a neoclassical theist. Pritchett and I were talking about this yesterday, and whatever you want to say about cognitive divine simplicity, I think there is something like cognitive simplicity because I affirm God's timelessness. Now I know that's a lot of rhetoric, but what I'm trying to say with that is where we have to think through a series of thoughts to arrive at something. God doesn't have to think that way. God has the entire future infinite set instantly in his mind. He doesn't have to think through the series. And a way of thinking about this is think about all the numbers between 1 and 100. In a sense, though imperfectly, you all know those numbers from 1 to 100, the whole numbers. You know them in a simple way. That is, if I ask you what comes after 43, you don't have to count up to 43 to arrive at 44. You just know it. You kind of hold all that in your mind at the same time. Or if I ask you what 10 comes after 30, you know it's 40. And so that's kind of that's a bad analogy or a simplistic analogy to think of God's cognitive simplicity, where yes, he has this knowledge of the future infinite, whether we want to call that potential or actual, but to hold things cognitive, what it kind of means to be potentially infinite on one definition is that it's cognitively known and not existent, certain kinds of infinite in reality. So if you want to think about God having knowledge of the future, that's fine. Just understand you don't run into the kinds of problems that something like Hilbert's Hotel would cause, or a past infinite universe, because God doesn't have to cross an infinite in his thinking to know a certain thing that's going to happen 10 trillion years in the future. He simply holds all that in his mind, like you hold that 40 is the next 10 after 30. And so that pretty well resolved it for me. And that's the answer that I typically give.
So the answer is no.
The answer is the answer I gave, as usual. I heard you say that to someone last night. Don't rephrase my answer.
No,
the answer I gave is my answer.
No. There's always this happens every time. So what you're saying is something other than what I said.
Right.
And what I always respond is, I always am saying what I actually said, and I'm never saying what I never said or what you perhaps inferred. I only mean what I said, and I'm only saying what I said. So whenever someone ever responds to you with, so what you're saying is blah, 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 blah. If that's not what you're saying, it's not what you're saying, because what you're saying is not what they're stating back to you that they think that you were saying, which you never said. So, but that's my standard line. I use that 3 times a day on social media because somebody always likes, so what you're saying? No, that's not what
I should have gone to the Pritchett Cam for that.
Yeah.
Benjamin Handelman says it gives us $5. Thank you so much.
Wait, you've already given, but thanks.
Yeah. He says the other benefit is when I get to watch Pritchett do videos on justification and then borrow content from a popular Catholic YouTube channel. Oh, maybe you're saying you borrow Pritchett's content.
Yeah.
Is that what he's saying? Or he's saying you borrow from the Catholics?
No, I think he's borrowing my content.
This is a question for Prime. Nick Quint says, indicative or subjunctive in Romans chapter 5 and verse 1, face with its tongue out.
Okay, so now that we have been...
While you think about...
indicative.
Okay. Writer John Buck says, hey, Braxton, looking forward to your interview with Salem, Inspiring Christianity, coming up. Yes, me too. Thank you for reminding me of that. And thank you for $5.
I'm trying to do the paraphrase in my head because I don't know. So having been, okay, so, yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's one of the great encouragers for me to get back to the Genesis series. She and C. Denise and a few others, and I really appreciate that. When I do the Genesis series, I know it's not going to get as many views as the normal content where I'm going after some atheist comment, but it's maybe what I think God's most pleased about this channel for. Oh, man. Let's see. What else do we have here? Any other? I mean, we're in the question and answer time or the comment and response
Neoclassical theism, boo. Put that comment up. That's funny.
If determinism to naturalism, I didn't see that comment, but I'll get to it in a minute. If determinism is to naturalism, how is libertarian free will to God? If determinism is to naturalism, how's libertarian free will to God? Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, but I think I can go into the neighborhood of what you're asking and flail about a bit and probably hit whatever tree you're trying to point to. So I'm so impressionistic today. But here's basically what we're saying here. So if naturalism is true, most of the thinkers I'm aware of will say probably determinism is true. Probably. And if theism is true, it doesn't necessarily mean that free will exists, libertarian freedom, but most Christians anyway think it makes it more likely that it can be true. I think every Christian should say that God at least has libertarian freedom because there was nothing determinative or random in a spaceless, timeless state. So yeah, I know, but I don't know how he gets a beginning for the universe then. But you lead to some people saying something like the universe is co-eternal with God,
right? And co-necessary. Like that. Yeah, that's a mess that he opens up. With
But go ahead.
Ideas have consequences to my Reformed friends when you say even God is determinate and all of this stuff. Look, when they say compatibilism, it's determinism, which many of them don't even know that. So the lesser educated, to put it politely, Calvinists who say that even God only has compatibilist freedom don't realize that that's determinism too. And if that's the case, there's only one cosmos that God could have created. He could have not created this cosmos and could have not decreed anything to be otherwise himself, which inevitably collapses into this universe is co-necessary. It is as necessary as God's being himself. And then to which our atheist friend would say, oh, so you do believe that in some sense that the universe is necessary. So what do you need a necessary existing thing? So what do you need God for? And then bam, you're right to atheism. So
well, you could still use a contingency argument maybe, but it would change things up for sure. So yeah, on determinism, if naturalism is true, I don't think it's necessarily impossible that you could have libertarian free will, because it could very well be that the answer I gave in my debate with Dan Barker that comes to us from Robert Kane and others like him could well be true. It could be that indeterminacy from the quantum realm during the chaos of hard thinking about decisions is felt at the level of experience and is not the cause, so that the cause is indeterminate, or so that the choice is indeterminate, but is an ingredient in the choosing process. So you could have that maybe on naturalism for all I know. But I'd say if you do, then it shoots down naturalism indirectly, because that's like the most designed feature I can imagine in all of creation. It doesn't seem necessary that we would have free will. And if we have it that way, that sure seems designed. But yeah, if God exists, well, then and the supernatural thereby, then there's another substance besides the physical. And if such an indeterminacy in our choices can occur, that is an ingredient in the process, well, then God could simply directly cause that indeterminacy or provide it as some sort of a gift to mankind when they make decisions, which is what I kind of think. So maybe something there helped out.
Punchbowl haircut. You should read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, written by Benjamin Franklin. It is a great read. I think you can probably read it in about 6 hours. You can find the audio version available on LibriVox or on YouTube. It was the first work in the first volume of the Harvard Classics, and you can find copies of it pretty cheap on Amazon too. I think we got our kids copies to read, and I think I paid like $3 on Amazon. With Amazon Prime, it was free shipping, so I think I spent $6 on 2 copies of it. But I hadn't read it until I bought the Harvard Classics, and that was the first thing that was in there. And so, I read that 3 years ago. 2 years ago, because we read it here recently at the same time. So it was right after I got that Harvard Classics set, because I'd never read the Harvard Classics. I'd only read the great books. So, but it's a fantastic read. So
all right,
you can find it on YouTube. And the guy who, speaking of which, you made a YouTube post about Batman's Christian Bale's Batman voice.
Yeah,
the guy who reads the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin on the YouTube version of the free ebook or audiobook on YouTube sounds like Batman.
How about that?
Sounds exactly
neoclassical theism. Boo.
So I am also, like Braxton, a neoclassical theist,
or a modified classical.
Yeah,
theist.
not a.
The programmer says, "What do you think of Dr. Malpass and Morrison's response to Craig that an infinite future is not possible?" Well, like what I'm familiar with is, okay, so you've got on an A theory of time, you have the present exists, the past doesn't exist anymore, and the future will exist but doesn't exist yet. So that like 1963 is not floating around somewhere out there. Well, Craig argues against a past infinite universe, and the point that they're trying to make is, okay, but why do you say you can't have a past infinite universe if going forward it's going to be an actual infinite future? And then Craig comes back with, well, it'll always be approaching an actual infinite, but never arriving at an actual infinite. And then you get into this discussion about whether there is a symmetry breaker between the past and the future when it comes to infinity and what is possible. And I find Craig's response to be compelling, that the difference between the future tense and the future perfect tense, I think I'm saying that right, is meaningful. There's a difference between saying the future is infinite, or the infinite, this we will praise God infinitely into the future, and we will have worshipped God. Like, will we get to that point where we will have, and how does that work? I think the past, one of the things that comes up is, well, if you're going to say the future doesn't exist yet, and that somehow matters, the past doesn't exist anymore on an A theory of time. So in either case, the future doesn't exist, the past doesn't exist. So what's the problem? And you need something to break that symmetry. And I just think, that there's a meaningful difference in the nature of the fact that the past has already occurred. I think that resolves it. I think to get to this point, you would have had to cross an actual infinite. To get to the end, you would have to cross an actual infinite. But we're going to be ever approaching the actual infinite in the future and never arriving at it. So I just don't see the problem. Now, Malpass wrote a paper on how you could get to an infinite by individual succession. So like counting from every year going forward, how you could get to an actual infinite future. All if not, as they say. But, and I read that paper. I'm not sure. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't know if it's been published anywhere yet. He sent it to me as a courtesy because we thought about discussing it. And I just didn't, I found it really interesting, but I just think it reduced back to the discussion that I'm aware of already, that we've been talking about, and that has been discussed already here and on the internet of late. So there's my answer to that. All right. Let's move on to the next thing. Anything else? Trinity Radio question. Why are burgers and cheese called cheeseburgers, yet burgers with pickles are called I think are not called pickle burgers, even though cheese is far more popular in burgers than pickles.
Okay, so you kind of answered your own question there, but there is an actual history to this. Hamburgers are hamburgers for a reason without cheese, and not everyone wants cheese on their hamburgers. It wasn't until probably in the last 20, 25 years that cheeseburgers actually became more standard, because it used to be hamburgers and with cheese. And some places still do this, like certain restaurants. Yeah, actually still have to pay additional money for cheese. I'm looking at you, Burger King, but most places historically, cheese was a separate thing. Whereas pickles, lettuce, tomato, pickle, and onion, standard fare on burgers in general. But so when the cheeseburger, or when cheese on burgers became more common than not, they just started adding that as a menu item and built it into the price, and that's kind of been the trajectory ever since.
All right.
Now, all of that could have been totally wrong, but I thought I'd entertain the question.
I want Braxton to flail about in Angel WVM's neighborhood.
But I can remember. I mean, I know people. Okay, so my stepdad does not like cheese on his burgers or cheese on things, and a lot of people they don't want it, and they used to never have it. So,
Dave Sherry, something like that, says, in the debate between Malpass and Rouser about unnecessary suffering in the animal kingdom, Braxton, do you affirm that even cats would be resurrected at the end of the world? Now, I don't, because you specify cats, it makes me think that you're as our British friends would say, having a laugh. But I'm going to answer it straightforwardly because I'm in the Steve Gregg school of thought. He was asked in a debate once by a questioner in the audience whether Adam and Eve would have had navels. And I thought it was hilarious because he just straightforwardly answered it. Well, Adam and Eve were created as special creations and didn't have mothers, so they wouldn't have had umbilical cords, and so they wouldn't have had the scar that is the navel. Just to answer it straightforward. It was funny because
it was just so
he was taking it sincerely, right?
Yeah.
And I asked him about that the other day when he was here, and he said, I never know if a questioner is asking to make a joke or if they're asking sincerely, so I just answer everything, no matter how silly it is, sincerely. And that's what I'm going to do now with Dave. I don't know whether animals will be resurrected. I just don't know. You know, if I'm not mistaken, C.S. Lewis has a view for which I don't think he has much basis, but that I like, that the animals that we bond with become a part of our personality in a certain sense. And so they carry along with us in the resurrection in some way. There's nothing, I don't think, to support that, except that it sounds nice and has kind of a hallmark ring to it.
I disagree vehemently with. There's not much to support it. I mean, when you're talking about soulish creatures, the fetish, same thing that we have. I mean, go read Job 12.
Well, that's not C.S. Lewis's point.
They know God better than all human beings.
But that's not the point
he's
making.
I have no reason to think why whether we bonded with them or not, there won't be animals. And I know people throw fits when
there's certainly going to be animals. We're talking about specific animals.
I think if you're worried about your cat, I'm not worried about your cat, but I am worried about the pets that I've loved. Why do you have to use cats, man? But no, I've said many times, your pet will be with you in the new heavens and new earth.
You can't say that like you know it, though.
Yeah, I do know it.
Okay. Well, Pritchett says yes. Here's my thing. If that's true and every soulish creature is going to be resurrected, if you take that to be an established truth, which I don't know how you would, then here's what that means. We will inhabit alien worlds because we will run out of space really quickly.
I keep hearing that. Now,
not with people, with animals. There's a lot of animals, man, in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And dinosaurs? Are dinosaurs coming back? All of them? Every one that ever lived?
Could be. I have no reason to think why your pets aren't going to be with you.
I mean, there's a lot of other planets that God could make habitable.
There may be other planets that are habitable now. It's a big cosmos out there.
I know. Super chat from Derek Baylor. He says, Pritchett's recommended reading list has over 100 items on it. Can he simplify it to which topics he recommends digging into the most initially?
No. He said, can he simplify it to which topics he recommends digging into.
Just start him
initially.
off. Give him a couple of books to start off with.
Start with Homer.
Don't start with Homer.
Start with Homer.
You'll give up too quick. I don't.
No, it's 1,001 Ways to Kill Someone with a Spear. Read it.
Okay, no,
It's
I'll
great.
tell you what you do. There is a book written like in the 1800s that I'm reading with my daughter that is the children's Homer, or or Homer for young people, or something like that. Get that one. It's readable.
Start at the beginning and read all of them. It'll take you 2 to 3 years, and you'll be done with it if you do active, steady, daily reading.
I'm late over here, Cole Young
all
says.
Of those books.
Was busy watching the new Genesis video from earlier, but pumped to be here. Well, praise the Lord. That's probably a more important video than this one.
The only other way I know to do it is to get. You can't unless you want to buy a used copy off of eBay. Or the Great Books of the Western World, because the Syntopicon volumes 1 and 2 of the set give you the topical index and where to find it and all the authors that are in the set. And if you get the Logos version, it's all hyperlinked within the set, which is fantastic. That's why I use that more than the book set on my shelf, because you can go straight to it. And you can follow the Syntopicon, which is great because you can find ideas of interest that you want to read what everyone within the series had said about that particular topic. So that would be one way to do it. But because most of the authors in all of those lists covered a broad range of topics, it's hard to just say, read this for that and read this for this and read that. So I say if you're gonna read my reading list, start at the beginning and work all your way through, or go get the Great Book set and follow the Syntopicon and chase that down through the hyperlinks, or if you have the print copy that you can get off eBay for, I don't know, $300 probably.
All right.
Follow that.
So Milton Weatherby, and before I read this, I just want to say, I think you have asked an in-depth question in the Patreon community, and I haven't responded to it yet, and I'm so sorry about that. I will get to it. And he says, you should do a show on simulation theory, a discussion as discussed by Inspiring Philosophy. We did that, and maybe it's not what you wanted, but we did something like that, not this past summer maybe, but the summer before, the first time we ever had IP on the show. And we talked about that, and we talked about idealism, and we talked about quantum physics and stuff like that. And it is an area that's really interesting to me. And I'm actually open to metaphysical idealism. Are you open to metaphysical idealism? By open, I mean, we want to be open, but I mean like
well, I've always been open to it. I'm probably more open to it now than ever.
And this actually, before you say anything else, this comes on the heels of also Jose's question, which is your favorite video by Inspiring Philosophy? It's a toss-up for me between his playlist on the resurrection, which I think is really good, and it's better than 99% of what's on YouTube, if not more. And then it's a toss-up between that and the first one on his quantum argument for God, or whatever, the quantum consciousness argument, which is really interesting and cool, and got me to reading quantum mechanics earlier this year. Someone just tagged my name. Hi. Here we go. A $20 super chat. Man,
Woo-hoo.
Come on. Thank you so much, Robert Nass Worthington. I am friendly to the idea that when we die, we sleep until the return of Christ. I'm not denying the soul or affirming other usually related ideas. Is this view heretical, completely out of orthodoxy, or highly unadvisable?
No,
it's not any of those things.
I don't personally ascribe to that. Chris Date does, but he's a physicalist. He's a physicalist, so he does actually deny the soul. So Nick Quint would affirm something similar to that too.
But you could affirm the soul and just say
you're not conscious. And then, of course, you'd have to say that whatever your theory of time is comes into play as to your passing from physical death to the presence of the Lord. It could be a time thing where if you're a B theorist, there wouldn't technically be any passing of time. Whereas if you're an A theorist, you would technically, from the perspective of anyone else still going along the timeline, be asleep, even though your next conscious experience might be at the resurrection. So it's a little... So really, at the end of the day, depending on where you come down on a whole lot of other things, whether it's dualism or monism or A theory or B theory or whatever, none of it's problematic or even unadvisable. I mean, if somebody out there, you will find an evangelical who will throw a fit. And that's the big
And call you a heretic.
yeah, and that's the big issue. That's the hill he's going to, because you can find someone for every idea out there. No, it's not unadvisable. It's not out of orthodoxy. It's not heretical. It's just another idea that whatever.
So, Kehan Yan, you say you're talking about the non-identity problem. I'm going to have to research that. I'll just tell you. But I think what you might be asking about is, do we like have a responsibility for people in the future who don't exist yet? And if that's the case, there may be a deep literature on that I'm not aware of, but my intuitive answer is yes. I think we should take care of our environment for that reason. I think we should proclaim and spread the gospel all around the world for that reason, because there are people who are not yet born but will be born in that culture who also need the gospel. So, yeah, but I could see how that could have implications for all kinds of things, social issues even. So, I'll go take a look at that. Thanks for keeping me up to date on some stuff. All right. Mr. Timotheus Ward says, with a PNG file as his profile pic, do you think any of God's commands exist simply because he just doesn't like something and not because it causes some kind of harm or damage? I actually don't have a problem with this. There is actually there's a video where William Lane Craig is responding. I don't remember if it was with What Do You Meme or David Wood or who it was, but one of those series where he just kind of, oh, it was What Do You Meme? He was responding to memes that people had, I think. And it was something about pork, about not eating pork. And Craig was like, there's nothing wrong with God just saying you're not allowed to eat pork just because he's God and he doesn't want you to eat pork. He could have easily demanded you not eat some other thing that he wanted. It's like, and I thought, yeah, he's God. So I don't think there's a problem with that. Pritchett?
No.
I'm looking for other questions here, but we have some dead air for a minute. Mr. Phil Fox.
Mr. Phil Fox.
$20.21. God bless this ministry. Here's to 2021.
Well, God bless your ministry, Mr. Phil Fox. I had such a great time just thrashing Calvinism because it'd been a while, right? And so we had a good conversation on that. We're going to finish it up. I think he said on the 24th. I'm good for that. So we're going to have some more fun thrashing Calvinism again.
Derek Baylor says.
So if you've missed Pritchett Prime thrashing Calvinism left and right, you need to go subscribe to Mr. Phil Fox's channel and go watch our previous conversation that we did back on the second, third, somewhere in there. Second, third. It was on the third. And then we'll finish up later. So be sure and check that out.
Yep. Okay. And Derek Baylor wants to know, is it true to say God's knowledge isn't added to when it goes from middle to free? Just a subset of his middle knowledge changes tenses to free knowledge.
Tim Stratton thinks so.
Yeah, what we're really talking. The point is, we're talking about logical priority here. God doesn't learn anything,
which is not my problem with it. But there's a logical dependency that I do have.
Pritchett thinks that it's still bad, even if it's just logical ordering.
No, not logical ordering is not what makes it bad.
Well, what's wrong?
The logical dependence upon God having to do something in order to know something.
Which comes out of the fact that it's where it is logically in the order, right?
It's still a dependence, because had God not decreed anything, there's things that he wouldn't know that he knows.
Here's the thing. Wherever you place middle knowledge, you could just still affirm the principle of middle knowledge.
Yeah, right? I do too, but
because that's why
I don't like the...
What do you call it?
I mean, I call it middle knowledge because it's what we call it, but I'm just saying the reason why it's called that is because it's right between natural knowledge and decree, prior to the free knowledge. And that's already setting it up on, backtracking from the Calvinist conception of, instead of the simple cognitive foreknowledge, view, it's the God's natural knowledge, then the decree, and then God's free knowledge, was Calvinism. And what Molina did was he dropped middle knowledge between the natural knowledge, the decreed formulation, and the free knowledge that's logically subsequent to the decree.
Andrew Mooney says,
I don't like it. I'm just saying I don't like it.
You guys lean toward A theory or B theory,
A theory.
and why? We lean toward A theory, and I'm aware that there's a lot of philosophers who lean toward B theory, but I lean toward A theory. I don't know why Pritchett does, but the reason I lean toward A theory is because I think that ideas like time worms, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, A theory is what we were talking about earlier in the video, where it's a notion of time where what exists on the timeline is what's happening right now. It's the one that most people, I think, intuit about the way the world is.
Keep talking.
The past did exist, but it doesn't exist anymore. The future will exist, but it doesn't exist yet. And what exists is right now. So there's not 1967 floating out there somewhere, and where like you could go to it or something. And then the B theory is the whole timeline exists. And like it's just it exists simultaneously, although of course when you start to add tenses it makes this difficult to understand, but you have this time block, it's just all there, and like you're looking at it in a snow globe, like that. So and the people within the experience are the people in the world like us are experiencing it as though it were in a theory of time. We're moving along from point to point to point. But if you weren't in the timeline, if you understand it to be a B theory, and if you could see it from the outside, so to speak, you would no particular position would be any more real than any of the others. The whole timeline is real. Now the problem I see, there's a number of problems. One of the problems is what are called time worms, and that means that if the past is real and the present is real and the future, then it's not just that you exist right now. You are a part of a being. There's different views on this too, but you're a part of a being that stretches back, in my case, to December 20th, 1980. That like the being that we call me exists on the timeline, stretched out throughout the duration of my life. Now, for Christians, that causes some problems, because at what point, like, are we saying that Braxton, prior to the moment of his salvation, let's say it was in 1990 or 1991, prior to my salvation, that part of me is unregenerate, but the rest of me is regenerate? I mean, what are we saying? Then there's this other view that it's like frames in a film, like where there's a literally infinite number of me's at every moment on the timeline. So then what's the real me? What does it even mean to say me? It creates all kinds of problems, and problems for temporal becoming and things like that. And so for those sorts of reasons, I reject it. That's my reason. I think Pritchett once said his reason was much more blunt than that, as you might imagine. He said, if 1967 does exist, where is it? So I don't know what you think about that, but there you go. Hervey Schmervy says, do you think the New Jerusalem will be placed on New Earth or orbit it? Do you also think that the no night part of it only applies to New Jerusalem and not the New Earth? So the idea here is that Christians believe that our physical bodies will be resurrected and we will be glorified, and that this earth will be resurrected, or perhaps this cosmos will be resurrected and glorified. And I believe that the New Jerusalem will exist on the new earth, and that will be our existence. And as for the like, if you're talking about Revelation chapter 21 or 22, I never can remember. I think it's 21, maybe it's 22, where it talks about they'll have no need for the sun because Jesus will be the light, or whatever like that. The Bible still talks about months and seasons and things like that happening. So I don't think we should take that passage, especially in a book as rich in metaphor, and everyone understands that Revelation is rich in metaphor, no matter what view of stuff it just depends on which things they think are metaphors. Of course, it tells us at the beginning of the book that it's going to give you metaphors and analogies and things like that, and imagery, because it says, here's the seven churches, and the seven churches have the seven stars, and the seven stars are the seven angels, and all those kind of things. So in a book like that, I think that we have to be careful what we take as literal. I think there's still reason to believe we'll have planetary orbits and a star like the sun, and all those sorts of things. I think that it's making a more important theological point. That's my take. Okay, let's see what else we have. Thank you all for sticking around. This is a lot of fun. Trinity Radio, do you think the laws of logic are dependent on God? Pritchett, you want to take this one since I haven't been in here for a while? My answer would simply be that, like I think that morality springs forth from God's nature, I would say the same thing about the laws of logic.
Yeah, I mean, they are dependent on God insofar as they're eternally active. The laws of logic, all of that stuff's ontologically grounded in the eternal active mind of God. So
Punch Bowl Haircut has a good question. Any thoughts on what's due regarding people not going to church as much, losing interest in that? It's a problem in California. What's it
it's
like
a
over here?
problem.
It's a problem.
Problem everywhere. And I think we spoke about this in the last episode. No, I spoke about it either on Mr. Phil Fox's show. I remember commenting on this recently. Yeah, I'm saddened by it. Not only is church attendance down overall around 70%, but it's about the same percentage-wise, 70% or so down on online engagement for church. So when we first all started the lockdowns, people were YouTube live or Facebook live their sermons and things like that, and everyone was watching at home, and that has tapered off. So COVID has pretty much wiped out church life in the United States, and I'm probably guessing around the world too.
It's a big problem.
So it's incumbent upon those of us who if we're the theology geeks, the apologetics junkies, all of that, if we are actually so concerned about Christianity and worldview, this is the time for everyone who's intellectually invested to become practically invested. So I want to challenge all the theology nerds out there. You all need to be the ones that are going out, pounding the pavement, finding your fellow church members and bringing them back to church. Because it's incumbent upon you to do it. Because I don't know if any pastors can't do it all by themselves. Associate pastors can't do it all by themselves. Sunday school teachers. So we need everybody getting involved and going back and trying to reconnect personal connections with your fellow church members. And if you didn't know who they were, well, that's a problem. But you can go remedy that by talking to your pastor and saying, give me a list of members that we have that we know their homes and addresses that haven't been coming. And I'll go out there and I'll knock on their door and I'll stand 6 feet away from the door with a mask on or whatever. But you all need to be the ones, if you're in this audience and you're a Christian, you need to be the ones going to church, and you need to be the ones that are going to find other people and bringing them back to church and tell them that you love them and that you miss them, etc. So that's my challenge to the theology geeks and the apologetics junkies in the world. It's time to stop reading your books for a few hours a day and get out there and bring people back to church.
Hey, Pritchett, Elizabeth Main says, I've never seen Pritchett standing before. Dang, fire. You're speechless, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that.
How do you explain the Mandela effect from your worldview? For those that don't know, the Mandela effect is the fact that...
Thank you, is all I know.
Someone, like, we remember lines from movies, for example, and everybody seems to have the same wrong memory. Like, I forget which way it actually is, but like when Vader says, Luke, I am your father. Like, that's what everyone remembers him saying, but it's actually, no, I am your father, or something like that. It's one or the other. Something like that. And everybody has the same wrong memory. Or like, there's a really good example of it, like the Oscar Mayer Wiener logo. Oscar Mayer, like I forget which way it is, but we spell it wrong. Like, do you spell it M-E-Y-E-R or M-A-Y-E-R? Whichever one you think it is, it's probably the other one, and everyone's making the same mistake you are. That's the Mandela effect. Some people have tried to explain this by saying, well, perhaps there's a multiverse, and that's like us kind of kissing the multiverse. Like, that's the way it is in that other universe or alternate dimension or whatever. I think there's probably an easier explanation, and that is our brains have similar wiring because we're all humans, and our system can sometimes make similar mistakes. That's my explanation.
Because of how little we pay attention to.
Yeah, but I could be wrong. I mean, that's not really my area of specialty. And if there is a multiverse, Jesus is king of it.
Amen.
So the programmer says again, if the future never arrives at infinite, doesn't it show that a future in heaven will come to an end? No. What if the future never arrives at infinite? it will always be approaching infinite without ever arriving at it. So it will be without end. Our future in heaven will be without end. That's what that would mean. What would mean it comes to an end is if you could actually cross an infinite and the future is infinite and you arrive at like the last moment of infinite. But that's not how we understand it works. Okay.
Nick Quinn has a question.
He says
Nick Quint's going to get a Marco Polo. You're going to get a Marco Polo from me that I'm going to send you, and it's going to make you feel terrible about yourself. All for that snarky comment that you gave at the beginning about me. So I'm going to send you a Marco Polo, and you're going to feel awful about your.
In light of the A-B theory of time, how does that work with the Trinity and the incarnation? Just thinking out loud. So one of the way that, well, with the A theory versus the B theory, it doesn't really come into it exactly. So like what classical theists and neoclassical theists like me would say is God is timeless. And so sans the physical universe, God exists timelessly. It's like there's not a B theory of time. There's not an A theory of time. There's no time. Mm. And then the B theorist would have God creating the whole timeline, I guess. The A theorist would say he creates, and then people like William Lane Craig, and I'm inclined to think this is correct, is from that moment of creation, he is in time in the sense that, even though he exists sans the physical universe, he's in time in the sense that he is aware of the passing of time for us. Mm-hmm. So he's not in time, but he's might as well be in that sense. So that's kind of...
Yeah, it's a bell that can't be unrung. And the problem with B theory and the incarnation is that you can have Jesus incarnated and not incarnated at the same time in the same sense. And that's a problem. You can have God having a conversation with Moses and not having a conversation with Moses at Mount Sinai at the same time in the same sense.
Benjamin Handelman.
That's a problem. That's why I reject B theory, because it causes these kinds of contradictions to creep up if you think about it. And people will say, no, it's not in the same sense because it's a different sense when it's transcendent and immanent. And I'm like, that's just wordplay. That doesn't make sense, because either God is speaking to Moses right now or he's not. And if it's B theory, then technically he would have to be.
Benjamin Handelman gives us another $5. Benjamin, what's going on? Does Revelation mention a new Disneyland? I still haven't gotten to see Galaxy's Edge, and I'm worried about missing it before the eschaton.
Ditto.
You know, that's kind of like, there's two things that, I mean, me too, but there's two things like about that when we think about, I don't know if there's going to be Star Wars in heaven or Galaxy's Edge in heaven, but I can tell you this, it's kind of like whenever people hear about Jesus saying that in heaven will be like the angels, there'll be no marrying or giving in marriage. And they think, well, wait a minute, does that mean there's not going to be any sex? Because heaven won't be heaven without sex, man. Well, that is as flawed as a little kid thinking, wait, is there going to be candy in heaven? Which probably there will be, but it's not going to be heaven without candy. And it's like, the scope is way too small. You're imagining it won't be heaven if it doesn't have this particular thing that you like. But your frames of reference are going to be so different when you're in the presence of God in heaven. And so I think that bears mentioning. But yes, there could be Star Wars in heaven. I don't know.
Yeah. When you think about the apocalyptic language in 2 Peter about, the point of that passage, we're talking about the elements melting and everything else. The point of that passage is that the works of the earth are going to be burnt up, right? And everything will be laid bare. And so what I'm interested to see is, I've thought about Disney World and other things like that. Cedar Point up in the roller coaster capital of the world up there in Ohio, which I want to get to as well. See, I'm interested in, I've thought about this and applying what's going to remain on the new heavens and the new earth. And we'll find out if those things were true, good, and beautiful, or if they were wicked and they get burned up with the rest of it. So, you can apply, it's a little bit of that theological speculation area, but that stuff's fun. I don't know why people are scared to have theological. I mean, some people consider the animals things theological. What's wrong with theological speculation? Much of Western theology is theological speculation, if you ask me, when it comes to what they're rambling on about in systematic theology. So why not? So I'm curious to see what remains on the earth as it's renovated and regenerated, as Jesus says, in Matthew. I want to see what's left, what remains. And I'm hoping But I won't be like you said, I won't be disappointed. 'Cause I mean, the new heavens and new earth is going to be heavenly for a reason. But I am curious to see what remains, what survives, what doesn't. So
Pritchett, the Mandela effect reminds him of the Star Trek, the Next Generation episode Parallels from season 7, where Worf
yeah,
keeps jumping between alternate universes.
exactly.
And Cole said that he got the two examples I gave correct.
That's a great episode, by the way.
Has Pine Creek ever made you doubt your faith? He has strengthened mine with his horrible arguments.
Yeah.
Part of it is he doesn't really so much give arguments. He gives hypotheticals. And who's the guy? There's a guy that's had me on his show that went on his show and just answered like straightforwardly without emotion. And like, these are not tough questions. I think some of it is he's afraid that people won't answer straightforwardly. But no, there's been a lot of times I've thought of doing a response video to some video Pine Creek made because it was like what he was saying about how Christian apologists respond about certain things was just like, not even like I disagree. It's just wrong. I don't feel compelled to make too much about him.
Has Pine Creek ever made you doubt your? Pine Creek should not make anyone doubt their faith. But again, Braxton and I have both been Christians for a long time. Braxton and I have both been engaged in apologetic material and material written by skeptics and critics of the faith for a long time. It's unlikely that we're going to hear anything that we haven't heard, even no matter how much they want to repackage it. So it's really hard at this point for any sort of intellectual reasons to doubt our faith. Sometimes I can cop to once a year.
Good job,
having
Milton.
emotional doubts, but as far as like any intellectual issues that would cause me to doubt my faith, I haven't come across any, and on some time now that have given me pause. And I don't think at this point in my life. Now, after I'm gone, there may be some new developments and new arguments and stuff, but I haven't heard any in 20 some odd years. So
I think I can honestly say I've never doubted Christianity while reading or listening to anything from any atheist I'm aware of. The times that I've had my own doubts
have emotional and existential
have mostly
crisis,
been emotional,
yeah.
Or if there was some intellectual thing, it was something I came up with, and it was a long time ago. So.
Yeah. It's all just repackaged stuff. This is one of the reasons why I want people to read through the history of ideas and the Western canon, because nobody is actually saying anything. I don't care how sciencey they get their stuff. If you read this stuff, you will find out that Solomon was right. If you want confirmation, there's nothing new under the sun. They can repackage it and dress it up a bunch of different ways. Our arguments are not anything new under the sun either, by the way. This conversation has been going on for a long time. Sometimes the window dressing is different, but the ideas, the fundamental principles underneath all of this stuff has remained unchanged. And once you understand those principles, you can dismantle any of the window dressing and peek behind the curtains at the ideas of which they were built on, and they don't hold up. So, yeah, that's why I always encourage you to go read.
Backwards Man 95 says, what do you think of a probabilistic argument against Molinism in the form of the naturalistic spread of Christianity? It just seems like you have to accept God favors some cultures. Now, I understand how you get there. So,
well, you have to do that on Calvinism.
Yeah.
I mean, God hates Middle Easterners. Apparently.
Be careful now.
No, I'm just saying that on this line of thinking, on this kind of criticism, if you applied it to Calvinism, you could say, God doesn't like Middle Easterners very much.
So,
and hasn't for centuries because Christianity is not popular there. And so God hasn't elected people in there on Calvin. So I'm just saying this is actually much worse for Calvinism than it is for
But if I understand
Molinism.
what you're asking me, I think you're asking me like, look, even like on Molinism, it took time for the spread of the gospel to, through centuries, reach all these different cultures. And there are still places that have never heard the gospel. And so if God actualized that kind of world instead of some other, doesn't that mean that he didn't care for those cultures to hear, at least for a really long time? And the thing about that is, number one, there's a couple of things. The first thing is to say, and you may already know this, I'm not presuming you don't, but Molinism does not say God could actualize any possible world. I mean, he could have actualized any possible world, but he's actualizing a world of free creatures. That's the better. If he's actualizing a subset of possible worlds, he's actualizing a subset of feasible worlds, the worlds where man has libertarian freedom. It may be that of that subset of feasible worlds where man has free creatures, that the spread of the gospel was quickest in this world. And that's why he actualized it. However, Molinists give another answer to generally what we call the fate of the unevangelized, what happens to people who never heard the gospel. And that is that you can't argue or you can't demonstrate that God did not actualize a world where the only people who never heard the gospel were the people who had what we might call transworld depravity, though I hate that word because it makes people think that they think of total depravity. But the idea that these are people who would have freely rejected the Lord in any possible world. The downside to that is, are you really saying that of a particular continent that not one person there would have accepted the gospel? And it's hard to conceptualize that, but we can't say that it's impossible. Another thing is just, how do you think God deals with people like that? None less than Billy Graham and William Lane Craig and my father hold the position, and the Bible Bro Down guys, that God judges people based on the light of revelation that they have. Paul says in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, the invisible things of God's eternal power and divine nature are clearly seen through what has been made, so that they are without excuse, the created world. And so we have a lot of light in the Western world today. We have scripture, we have resources, we have stuff like this. They don't have or didn't have a lot of light, and perhaps God judges them based on that. To whom much is given, much is required. A lot more might be required of us. So there are available options, I think, for answering that question. What are you laughing about, Pritchett?
Well, first I was laughing at the Marco Polo Nick sent me, but I'm still going to send him my Marco Polo, so he's got that coming.
What do you think of open theism? I don't think that open theism is a heresy.
Yeah,
but I think I think it's false.
Yeah. I think it's false. I think it's far more harmless than its biggest detractors make it out to be. It's like, but I'm not sold on it. I don't like a lot of the rhetoric from open theists when sometimes they want to knock Greek philosophy while using it on their own. It's the same. They have a lot of the same issues with Calvinism, with that Calvinists have when it comes to philosophy. They don't realize how philosophical their views are, even though they're trying to say we're just being exegetical and all of that. Well, no. So some of their rhetoric is annoying in the same way that Calvinist rhetoric is annoying sometimes. But I think it's wrong, and I think it's harmless. I don't get worked up about open theism. I think they're wrong, but
I'll say that what I appreciate about them is they're trying to take the scripture and read it as plainly as just read straight. What does it say? It says, I did not intend this, didn't come into my mind, or whatever. And they're like, well, there it is. Didn't even come into his mind, so he didn't know. I appreciate that, but I'll tell you what, some of those the passages that I think would give me pause and make me consider open theism, I think were handled pretty well in the debate that Tyler Vela had on that subject last year. It was pretty good, and not just that he gave answers. I'm like, oh, that technically can get you out of this. That's answers that seemed plausible to me. So I'll say that. Any video games where you actively follow the lore? Not really, unfortunately. Or maybe that is fortunately. I don't know. But I used to, but not really anymore.
Follow the lore.
Yeah,
like follow the storyline.
Yeah, like if you follow the Zelda story all the way through,
or the Assassin's Creed story and all that stuff.
Yeah,
you've
that'd
told
probably
me,
be the closest.
Yeah,
but I'm several games behind on that.
Yeah, Eddie. People looking for reasons to reject it—that's a sin problem.
Open theism is a heresy. Yes, not a heresy, but a heresy. That's from our old intro.
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, listen, we've been going at this for a long time. I say that every week. We've been going at this for a long time.
So that means we have about 30 more minutes. Well, no, I do want to plug. Wait, what?
I'm new here. Who's the meh-looking dude in glasses? That's Zom.
Yeah, I know.
All
and
right.
y'all subscribe to his channel because one day he's going to
Yeah.
actually do something with
He
it.
he just did something.
I know.
So,
But
all
I
right.
mean, like, other than complain about the prices and trust me, we know that struggle. That's why you set up a Patreon account, and we'd probably support it.
Have you guys noticed that you're not hearing the dripping today? It's because I've turned my volume off and you couldn't hear it. But anyway, not long enough, Elizabeth says. Well, Elizabeth.
There's all kinds of content. Everyone, check out my recent episode with Mr. Phil Fox. Again, I want to plug that again, and we'll finish it up on the 24th, I think. If I'm getting that wrong, Mr. Phil Fox, you need to put something in there. But I think it's on the 24th we talked about. I do want to plug Theology Geek Fitness. We have a group of people all going through the same program that started, but you can start anytime. It's a 24-week program. We make no promises that you'll have a huge transformation in 30 days. This is a lifestyle change and a long road for people that are in certain conditions, but people who are about in the same position I was a couple years ago. This is for you. This is going to
like me.
Yeah, like I didn't want to say it, but I'll let you say it.
Hey, listen.
Yeah. So check out Theology Geek Fitness.
Yeah.
Go check out the videos. Go check out the Facebook group.
They'll see it all there in the Facebook group. And again, thank you to our patrons. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all the people who give super chats. That just means so much. And thank you for everyone who just views and subscribes. And if you haven't done that, do that right now. We would greatly appreciate it. And hey, here's an idea. Go back and listen to our back catalog, man. At least as far back as what's on YouTube. Because even though the quality isn't as good in terms of the video and audio, some of the best moments are back then.
Oh, some of the best moments for audio podcasts on BraxtonHunter.com. I don't know that we got all of them up there, but man, there was some fun fire stuff in that stuff in the old audio podcast. I don't know if that is even still on iTunes or what, but
maybe they can find it.
Yeah, go check that stuff out. Go check out Theology Geek Fitness. I said that. Go check out Trinity Radio Extra. Go check out Nick Quint's Split Frame of Reference podcast, and go check out the Synergist podcast, since he's been so fun and active in here. I want to plug that too. Oh, and my friend Adam Coleman. I always want to give a shout out to Adam Coleman. Go check out his YouTube channel.
And with that,
Chris Featherstone's Vision United. Shout that out. Chris Date, Leighton Flowers.
We'll see you next time.
Bible Brodown
on Trinity Radio.
Any other good podcasts I could go listen to?
Cole Young.
Yeah, Cole Young. Oh, his channel's awesome. Go check out his channel. Yeah. Cole Young, he's also a fellow Theology Geek Fitness guy.
Yes, Tim. I'm going to get the vaccine when it comes out. True ID. I'm feeling slighted by JP.
I need to wear my True ID shirt again.
Why is Derek feeling slighted?
Oh, because I didn't call out. See, this is the problem. When you try to start naming everybody and you don't get to everybody, you're going to offend someone.